Hello, wonderful biology students. Our next unit is that of chemistry in biology. The idea is that atoms are made up of elements, and these elements combine to form different molecules that make up living organisms such as ourselves. One of the things, though, is that the autotrophs are going to be the key organisms that make organic molecules and put those organic molecules into the system itself. The autotrophs, such as plants, algae, and many bacteria, contain simple raw ingredients such as carbon dioxide and water, and through a process called photosynthesis, make simple sugars. So therefore, what we have are inorganic molecules such as carbon dioxide and water combined to make one of the more simpler types of organic molecules of sugar. Then the autotrophs, as well as heterotrophs, can take these sugars and through a different process called cellular respiration, break down these sugars and other organic molecules. One of the main objectives in breaking down the sugars is to make this chemical called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, that all living organisms use as their cellular energy. So the energy transformation of photosynthesis and cellular respiration will be discussed later on in the unit. Ironically, of all the elements in the periodic table, very few of them make up the bulk of any living organism. And these are going to be making up, for example, our sugars, our proteins, our lipids, and some of them are going to involve with enzymes, some of them are going to be involved with coenzymes, etc. But the main objective is of all the different elements, we're made up of very few. We call them CHNOPs, and that's going to be a simple way to remember that. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Elements are made up of atoms, and atoms have subatomic particles. Protons are going to have the positive charge, neutrons don't have any charge in them, and electrons will have a negative charge. We're going to see that each of these have a particular role within the atom itself. Most likely, we're going to look at the electrons in terms of being involved in chemical bonds. Neutrons are involved with different types of isotopes. Protons combined with neutrons give the atomic mass of an element. On the periodic table, we have different letters. Each letter represents the actual symbol of the element discussed. For example, carbon is made up of 6 protons and 6 neutrons and has a symbol of C. The neutrons and the protons are going to be within the nucleus of the atom. So therefore, protons plus neutrons, so in carbon we have 6 protons plus 6 neutrons, that gives us the atomic mass of 12. However, the number of protons is going to always remain constant. Therefore, the atomic number that we see in the periodic table will always represent the number of protons that an atom has. But what about the electrons? What is their key job? Electrons are going to be involved with chemical bonds. Atoms can give up, accept, or share electrons in order to fulfill that outer valence shell. And in terms of biology, we're going to look at mainly the first few levels of where the electrons reside. And so, like for example, in the first orbital, the maximum that the electron can hold is going to be 2. In the second orbital, the maximum the electrons can hold would be that of 8. We're not going to get much further than a couple of the orbitals because of the way that our study of biology is with the study of chemistry. So for example, in this case here, we notice that the sodium atom, although it can hold 8 electrons in the outer orbital, it only has 1. Therefore, in order to, shall we say, conserve energy, it's much easier for that sodium atom to give up the electron to chlorine. What that means is now chlorine has 1 extra electron and chlorine has 1 less electron when they first started out. That gives chlorine an overall negative charge, and it gives sodium an overall positive charge. Notice they're not going to be in contact with each other, but rather this attraction between positive and negative charges will give that characteristic ionic bond between 2 atoms. The other type of bond is that of the covalent bond. A covalent bond is the sharing of an electron. It's not giving or receiving, it's actually sharing electrons in that outer orbital. So in this case here with hydrogen, you'll notice that in order to fulfill the 2 max of the outer orbital that hydrogen has, 2 atoms of hydrogen can share electrons to form a covalent bond. So you'll notice that a covalent bond consists of 2 electrons. Every now and then you might come across what is called a double covalent bond. We see that often, for example, in one of the functional groups of amino acid, the hydroxyl group, where we have a double bond carbon oxygen and a single bond carbon to the hydroxyl, and that would be a double covalent bond there. What that means then is that within the outermost orbital of those 2 atoms that are combining, 4 electrons are being shared. The same result, we have a much more stable atom on either side of the electron sharing. Lastly, we have a different type of bond that does not involve electrons, but is the result of unequal sharing of electrons. So in the case of water, the oxygen atom of the water, shall we say, hogs the electrons, and the electrons simply spend more time around the oxygen atom. Therefore, the oxygen atom has a slightly negative charge. Compared to, for example, the hydrogen atom, because the electrons don't spend as much time around that atom, it has a slightly positive charge. Therefore, because the water has both a slightly positive charge and a slightly negative charge within it, water is considered to be a polar molecule. What is unique, though, is that a polar molecule such as water can also form these hydrogen bonds between. So you'll notice that the hydrogen bond is created between the plus hydrogen of one molecule and the negative, in this case oxygen, of another molecule. We'll note later on how important the hydrogen bond is in giving water many of its unique properties. We'll also see when we study our DNA that each side of the DNA is held together by hydrogen bonds as well. So in the meantime, because water is so important, that'll be a whole nother lesson for later on.